Today, you are going to learn how, should things go sideways, how just common trees that's out here on my Prepper Retreat property that's out in the middle of nowhere, but how these common trees can be used to make medicines. Because if things go sideways, you're just not going to be able to run down to the drugstore. So out here is a pharmacy. But today we are going to learn how these trees can be used to treat ailments such as diabetes, high blood pressure, skin infections, skin burns, constipation, ailments like coughs and cold and the flu, gout and arthritis, and parasites such as lice, anxiety and stress, and even toothaches, and that's just to name a few. Seriously, there is a whole pharmacy out here. Now obviously every tree that I point out in today's video and their medicinal uses should not be misconstrued as medical advice in this video. But I do believe that every tree that I'm going to point out and what their medicinal uses are, I do believe that every one of these are what traditional Native Americans used these trees for back before the United States came about and all the pharmacies and everything like that. Now, if you watch this channel long enough, then you know that I have a strong belief that there's a good likelihood that we will enter into another Great Depression 2.0, if you want to call it, sometime in the future. And as we all know, when Great Depressions or Great Recessions happen, things like food and medicine skyrocket. Especially if you're seriously sick and you're not able just to run down to the pharmacy, either because the pharmacy's closed down or if you just don't have the money to afford that cough syrup or whatever medication that is that you're needing. So I believe it is extremely important to know how you can get natural medicinal uses out of the trees and plants that surround you. So let's jump into this. So the first tree on my property that we're going to visit is going to be this eastern white pine. Here's the little baby one here, and then you got the adult fully grown pine trees in the background there. Now the first thing about these pine trees is this is where they obviously have pine cones, and that's where you get pine nuts from. So you got a good source of food coming from these trees. But beyond the food source that these trees give you, these needles are also very high in vitamin C, and the Native Americans used to make a tea out of these pine needles to make, again, a tea that would help fight stuff like a cough, the cold, the flu, and stuff like that. And the next tree that we're going to visit here on my property is the much maligned beech tree. Now, even though these beech trees are disliked by a lot of different people, these beech trees do produce the beech nut, which actually contains a healthy fat and also a lot of vitamins and nutrients should things go sideways and you just can't run to the grocery store. So these trees actually do have some uses. And with the bark and the leaves of this beech tree, you can make things that can treat diarrhea, which you will have after things go sideways. And the Native Americans would also use the bark and the leaves from the beech tree to treat things such as coughs and fever and respiratory ailments. Now our next tree here on my property is the black walnut tree. Now, as you know, these produce walnuts. And the great thing about walnuts is walnuts have healthy fats in them that will probably be sorely lacking in a lot of people's diet should things go sideways because, well, fats don't typically store that long, so a lot of preparedness individuals don't have good healthy fats stored back. So having a tree like this that produces good healthy fats, I think, is priceless. Now, besides the healthy fats and the extra nutrients that you get from the black walnuts themselves, I believe the Native Americans also even use the hulls from the black walnut to treat things like fungus and ringworm and athlete's foot and stuff like that. And in fact, even the hulls, I believe, can be used to treat internal or intestinal parasites such as ringworms, hookworms, and whatever other kind of worms that you get when you eat bad food. And then I also learned that you can use the hulls from the black walnut to even act as a laxative for you. So for all you preppers out there that have a bunch of MREs put in your food stockpiles and those things back you up, boom, one of these are going to be your answer. And then I also learned that back in the old days that people would use the hulls from the black walnut to make ink. There's just so many uses to a black walnut tree. It really surprised me. Now the next trees that we're going to look at here are my beloved maple trees. And I really enjoy maple trees because if you watch my channel before, then you know that I tap maple trees every year and make my own maple syrup, which is just the best stuff ever. But what a lot of people don't know is that when you make maple syrup is that you can continue boiling that maple syrup down even more until it turns into pure sugar, which you can use for whatever recipes you need to use after you can't go to the store and buy sugar from the grocery store shelf. But something I found really interesting is that Native Americans would use the sap from this tree to treat urinary tract infections. And you can reportedly also use the sap to treat indigestion. So if you get indigestion a lot and you're not able to run to the pharmacy or the grocery store to get Tums or whatever, here's one of your answers. And then we have the bark of the tree, which Native Americans would use to treat things such as diarrhea again, and fever, and I believe coughs also. And then lastly, if you're familiar with the helicopter leaves that fall from most maple trees, actually you can harvest those and roast those, and they're actually pretty good, and they'll have extra vitamins and nutrients in those also. So also a good food source. Now let's next talk about these oak trees. I've got a ton of these oak trees on my property, both white oak like you're seeing here and also red oak. And one of the things I've learned is that the Native Americans would use both the bark and the leaves to make a tea that was used to treat sore throats, gum disease, and even varicose veins. And then if somebody had diarrhea, the Native Americans would use just the bark from the tree for medicinal uses to treat that diarrhea. So yet another tree that helps to treat diarrhea. And then this bark is also astringent and also antimicrobial. So it was used to treat things such as burns and skin infections and simple wounds on your skin. And that is really important to me because back in the old days, and back when people couldn't run to the pharmacy, simple cuts and simple burns killed a lot of people because those simple cuts and burns would get infected. So if you don't have the ability to run to the nearest grocery store or pharmacy after things go sideways in order to buy rubbing alcohol or some other type of medicine, being able to make something like this, I think, is, again, super important. Now, of course, as you all know, these oak trees drop acorns every year. And acorns, once you leach the tannins from the acorns, are actually a good source of food. You can either roast the acorns and eat them roasted like that, or you can even grind the acorns down into an acorn meal and even make stuff like acorn pancakes with them. And of course, we can't forget that the tannin that you get from these trees when you leach them out of the acorns, you can actually use that tannin to help tan the hide of animals that you harvest. So a lot of good uses for this tree, both for food and medicinal uses. Okay, now let's talk about my beloved Paw Paw trees that grow here wild, natural on my property. And if you've never heard of Paw Paw before, it is a wild growing fruit that grows in a lot of the United States. And if you've never had one before, you got to think of the taste is between the cross of a mango and a banana with vanilla flavoring in there with a very custard-like flesh on the inside of the fruit. So again, it's my favorite fruit and I absolutely love it. So obviously having a tree that just grows wild on your property or near you that produces fruit is extremely important should things go sideways, but there are also medicinal uses to this tree also. So the Native Americans would use the leaves from this tree to treat things like inflammation and skin irritations, and then they would use the bark from the Paw Paw tree to treat things like ringworm and lice. And I don't have a crystal ball to tell the future in, but my guess is that after things go sideways, things like ringworm and lice will probably be pretty commonplace. Now let's talk about sassafras trees, and I got a little baby one here that we can use for this video. And reportedly you can use the leaves from the sassafras tree to make a tea to help with inflammatory conditions like rheumatoid rheumatoid arthritis, I think it's how you pronounce it. And that same tea is supposed to help with things like gas and constipation also. But a word to the warning with the sassafras is that it contains saffrol, which so evidently you're not supposed to drink more than just a couple of cups a week of any tea that you make from this tree. Now let's talk about the aspen tree. And one of the things I really like about these trees is that when just a breeze blows, the leaves in these trees just really get to fluttering in the wind and just really make a beautiful sound, which is why a lot of, they get the name quaking aspen. But a great thing about these trees is that the Native Americans would use the leaves and the bark from this tree to treat bug bites, but they would also use the bark from this tree to make a natural painkiller to treat pain, obviously, just like, or similar to aspirin. And let's move on to the hickory tree. And as you can see, this is a shagbark hickory tree. Now the first great thing about hickory trees is they produce the hickory nut, which is full of healthy fats and a lot of other vitamins and nutrients, which I believe will be vital when things get tough. Now I've made hickory syrup out of the shagbark hickory trees before in the past, so I really won't get into that, but these trees also have a few medicinal uses to them also. One of the first things I learned is that Native Americans would use the bark from this tree to treat chronic pain such as like arthritis. And then they also use the bark to treat things like bronchitis and coughs, and even, surprise, diarrhea again, and indigestion. Now the next tree that we're going to visit is a pecan tree, and I really wish I had mature pecan trees that grow on my property, but unfortunately I only have baby ones because pecan trees in my area don't grow too much because of that blight that killed a lot of them. But anyways, the trees that I do have are blight resistant pecan trees, and I even have some grafted pecan trees here on my property that within 5 or 6 years they should actually start producing pecans themselves. But obviously, as you know, pecan trees produce pecans, which is a good source of healthy fats and other vitamins and nutrients. But one of the cool things about this tree is that you can use the bark from this tree to treat things such as toothaches and sore throats. And then reportedly you can also use the leaves from the pecan tree to treat such things as diabetes and high blood pressure. Okay, this here is really exciting. This is the elderberry. Now this is technically, it's a shrub and not a tree, but very excited because as I'm still learning all these different trees and different plants that's growing wild and natural here on my property, I found this elderberry recently. And of course you can't go into a pharmacy into the cough syrup aisle without finding cough syrup with the elderberry in there. So very excited about this. Now if things go sideways and me and my family have to come here, it's great to be able to use these trees and different plants for both their food and also their medicinal uses. But obviously if somebody gets shot or stabbed or impaled or something like that, a lot of this stuff is not going to help with things like that. However, everyday common things that really bring you discomfort, like coughs and colds and flu, or things that could actually end up killing you, like cuts and burns and stuff like that. Having a natural pharmacy plus having the knowledge of how to extract these medicinal properties from these different trees and plants and stuff like that, I think is going to be priceless for if things go sideways. Now, to keep this video at a reasonable time, I did not show me making any medicines from any of these trees. But if you would like to see videos in the future where I do make natural medicines, the same medicines that Native Americans made from the trees and the shrubs that's on this property, comment down below letting me know if you would be interested in that or not. And if enough of you actually comment that you would like to see videos like that, then I will actually make videos where I make the medicine and actually consume it on the video. And if you have ever considered growing food-bearing trees yourself or a guerrilla garden or anything like that so that you have food after things go sideways, then you really need to watch the video that should be appearing on the screen just about now so that you don't have failure with that. All right, folks, this is enough internet for me today. I do need to get back to work. And folks, if you made it this far, hey, thank you very much for watching. And I pray that you have a good night.